I mean, it just can't even describe how cathartic it was for me then to have the luxury of tour organization with the exoticness of like Indian culture and food and scenery, with the performance and the thrill, the adventure of the group that was there. It was a defining life moment for me. Began a different career.
Right.
So much life transition, so much life challenge,
Yeah.
and yet it absolutely never left my mind.
Yeah.
It never left my dreams, but it stayed in that lofty dream state for a long time. And it was only until really last year that I thought, I need to get back. I've got to get back there. I've got to get back. It's been tugging at me. It would never let go. You can't forget the Tour of Nilgiris.
I am Venki, a working professional in IT as well as an amateur masters athlete and a coach for endurance sports. You are listening to the Working Athlete podcast. Here, I talk to working athletes from all walks of life and experts from various sports to provide you with inspiration, training tips, and lifestyle advice. If this is something that interests you, I have a small request from you. Please subscribe to the channel on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also let me know what you like and what you would like to listen to more of by commenting in the comment section on YouTube. I promise to do my best to improve with each episode and bring you the best content that helps you and me get better each day. In this episode, I talked to Peter Roper. Peter is a working athlete from Colorado, USA. I first met Peter during the Tour of Nilgiris 2018. This year, he was back at TFN 2024 after 6 years. It was great to sit down with him during the rest day on TFN and speak about his early cycling, racing in the US, his experience of running a bike shop, etc. We talked about how he manages to keep his cycling going and what brings him back to TFN, among other things. Peter is a bundle of positive energy and a fun guy to ride with and talk to. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. This episode is brought to you by The Bike Affair. If you are in search of a one-stop destination that caters to all your cycling needs, our today's sponsor, The Bike Affair, is the perfect place to check out. I have known the founders of The Bike Affair, Krish and Gokul, personally for nearly 15 years now. In fact, my first century ride was with Krish back in 2008. They are both exceptional human beings and entrepreneurs that believe in providing exceptional service to their customers. And it shows. With over 14 years of experience, the Bike Affair has established itself as a trusted source offering honest advice and exceptional service. They are offering a special treat for the listeners of this podcast. You can enjoy a 10% discount on your first order by using the code BikeyVenki on their website. So if you are in Hyderabad, visit their store in Kondapur, or if you are anywhere else in India, shop online by using the link thebikeaffair.com. I will leave the link in the show notes. Now, enjoy the podcast. Hi, Peter.
Hello.
Welcome to the Working Athlete podcast.
Thank you.
The first time I met you was back in 2018 in Tour of Nilgiris.
Yeah.
And here we are in 2024 in Tour of Nilgiris.
Yeah.
So, and after 6 years, you're here.
Yeah.
Okay. But before we talk about this, let us go back a little and talk about how, in the first place, you got into cycling as such.
I've thought a lot about this as I get into my adult life, but there's two events that kind of come to mind. Not two events, but two specific things that come to mind. The first was when I was given my first bicycle. It sounds so cliche to remember your first bicycle, but I actually remember it was like a red, must have been a hybrid they probably didn't have hybrids back then. It was a 10-speed, just a red 10-speed. It was way too big for me, of course, but I think it was maybe Christmas, and I went out and I started riding And that was fun. That was good fun. Okay, so I remember that, right? That's probably the story of my first bicycle. But more importantly, when I got into college, I picked up my first kind of ragtag steel bicycle and mountain bike and got a group of my friends together to go mountain biking. And that was where I discovered the really recreational aspect of cycling, where we slowly just biked more and more, and we challenged each other, and we'd say, well, who can do this faster or harder, and we would do up and over rocks, and we formed quite the core there. And from that point, it really stuck. And so then I started just doing more, longer, harder, faster, to the point where I joined the cycling team for the college, for CU.
Oh.
And that was when I learned that I was far and away the least fast person at the university. That was when I learned what the tip of the iceberg really looks like in terms of cycling, fitness, and eliteness. There's always someone who's so much faster than you.
Yeah.
So and I raced with CU then for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Which year was this? When was this?
This would have been maybe 2001, 2002.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
And then I graduated. And so I wasn't with the team anymore. And then I just raced recreationally and rode my bike.
Right. So what was the level like in CU when you were part of CU? What was the racing scene like? What were the races you guys were taking part in? What was the whole scene like?
Collegiate racing is fun. It's not as long as like XCO. And to be honest, it's a blur. When you're in college, it's just you're constantly aspiring to the really fast guys. Ooh, how do I get to be fast like them? I remember one of my close mentors, who's actually a frame builder now, Walt. He runs Walt Works Steel Bicycles, which is the bicycle I brought to the Tour of Nilgiris in 2018. And he was a bit of a mentor because he was really fast. I mean, he was just mind-bendingly fast. And so I really aspired to him, and the scene was just chaotic. I learned everything about bike racing just through trial and error. So I learned very much the hard way what it's like to not get the whole shot in a mountain bike race, right? And so all of a sudden, I'm just jammed up with everyone. But yeah, so that's where I learned a lot of the hard knocks of bicycle racing. Everything, from nutrition, bonking, to going out way too hard initially. At the collegiate level, as kids, they just go out. The starting gun goes and they go out maximum effort. And then 200 meters later, they're cooked. And that was me. I had so many races where I'd go out and I'd be going maximum, and I'd never pre-ride the course, right? That's not something I learned. And so then all of a sudden the course takes a hard right onto the dirt, and I'm just sending it just on the ground, falling, crashing through the barriers because I didn't pre-ride the course and I was going bats to the wall. So just those kinds of funny lessons that I look back. And it was so much fun. And for the most part, I just raced into shape. I never trained. I didn't have a training program. There was no coaches. So you just race hard. You're a kid. You just go.
Nice. And once you graduated and got out of the college, did you start working, and how was the riding at that time?
Yeah, I worked. I got a job as an administrator at the university, actually, and just began working, doing a normal job. And for the most part, bicycling and skiing were still very much my hobbies. But I understood that you have to work first and then do hobbies. And it's only more recently that I've really tried to tread the very fine balance between maybe not work so hard and maybe hobby a little more.
Yeah.
But no, for several years there, when I was working at the university, I'd still ride a lot of mountain biking.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how many hours or stuff are we looking at? Did we even track?
Well, it's funny. You don't track those things
Right.
when you're a kid,
Yeah.
right? When you're a young adult, fresh out of college, you don't think of your life in terms of budgets of hours.
Right.
You just have one thing you have to do, and then you have all these things that you could do. I could go out and party, but my group of friends would always want to do epic adventures. So we would work, and then we would plan, and Friday after work we would go and we would drive to either go backpacking, or we would drive to go do a weekend of mountain biking in Moab, or we would have some trip. And so, if it was the winter, we had a pretty strong regimen that every weekend, without fail, every single weekend at 6 a.m. you meet at the coffee shop and you go for a backcountry ski, or you do something like this. So when now that you ask, I think back, it's not about the hours. You go all day.
Yeah.
You get up first in the morning and you eat an absurd amount of calories, some burritos and coffee and whatever. And then you go and you adventure all day, and you get home 5, 6, 7, I don't even know what time.
Right.
You eat some dinner and you crash, you go to sleep. And then you do it all again the very next day.
Yeah.
And then on Monday you go back to work.
Right. Nice.
Yeah.
And were you kind of racing amateurly after college? And
I did.
How did it go?
Yeah, I raced. Racing used to be better. I know that sounds so cliche,
Right.
but racing has suffered a lot. Mountain bike racing in the States, there used to be several circuits and good circuits, and I would race those. They were just so much fun.
Were you traveling for these races, or was it
They're
all
close.
in
Yeah, they're all in Colorado.
Yeah.
It would be, anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours to get to the race.
Right.
No problem.
Yeah.
And they would have these races would be maybe 6 to 8 a year per circuit. And at one point, there were 3 different circuits. So there was lots of races to choose from. It was great fun. And for the most part, you see a lot of the same racers.
Yeah.
All but one of those circuits has shut down. And the one that remains only has, I think, 3 or 4 races. So mountain biking has really... There's still good mountain bike races, and there's a couple that are coming up. But yeah.
But was there any road racing back then, or even now?
I only picked up road biking since, I would say, about 2012, 2013.
Right. Oh.
Until then?
Only after like 10, 12 years.
Yeah. It's so interesting because up until then, I biked for the pleasure and the thrill and the adventure of it. I didn't really get the sense that I needed to train or have some amount of base. Road cycling is a lot about base, and if you ride for 3 hours, if you haven't trained, you're going to hit the wall. But if you've trained, then 3 hours is no big deal.
Yeah.
And so road cycling sort of tests a person's limits differently than mountain biking. Mountain biking, you go for 90 minutes. You go, you have fun. You don't typically do very long mountain bike rides. And if you do, you pack a lunch and it's slow and it's fine. But I started road biking later, about 2012, 2013.
Right.
And I remember that Ashish, my cousin, and I found a local group ride of road bike racers. And that, similar to when I started mountain bike racing in college, that was a similar steep learning curve where I realized, oh wow, there are some very fast people out there.
Yeah.
Because it was a group ride it wasn't a gentleman's group ride. It was a drop ride, and it was meant to be hard and fast. And they rode in a peloton, and within seconds of the group getting started, Ashish and I would be shot out the back, and we'd have lost it. But we were young, and we wanted to get in.
Yeah.
And now, what is it, 10 years later, I can stay with the group, and I can be part of the group that attacks, and I can be part of the dynamic nature of that group. And so it was another evolution as far as getting into road cycling specifically.
Right.
So before 2000, say, let's call it 2012, I didn't even think about road bike racing. It never crossed my mind.
Right.
I would never do it. Then I learned through this group ride, I learned about crits and road bike races and all of that.
Yeah. So what sort of racing calendar was like?
For me or for the state?
For the state and for you.
So Colorado it starts to thaw out and de-ice sometimes as early as March. And so there's a few bike races that'll maybe go off. I think that there's a race called the Frostbite Time Trial.
Okay.
So there's a couple of cute ones that try to go early.
Yeah.
But it's a gamble.
Yeah.
There could always be snow.
Yeah.
And then there's a bit of a regimen of about one race a weekend. Whether it might be a crit, it might be a road race. We don't have very many time trials, ITTs. But there's a weekly ITT series that goes off on Wednesdays. And that goes maybe 10 times. Okay. I'm not old enough to be a time trialist yet.
Yeah. That's a good
That's the next generation. And then I'll become a triathlete.
That's a good one.
You see, you start mountain biking, reckless, then you turn into road bike and you're hardcore. But I haven't done ITT.
Yeah, that is a good one. So what you mentioned Ashish and being your cousin, you said. What's the connection there? What's the connection to India and
So my stepmother is Indian. She's from Pune.
Okay.
Her brother, her brother's son is Ashish.
All right.
And they were close, very, very close. And so I came to Pune first, probably when I was 2, and then came maybe every 4 years.
Oh, okay.
I might have those numbers backwards, though. It might have come when I was 4 and came every 2 years.
Oh, okay.
Either way, we came regularly when I was growing up and stayed in Pune. And I played all the time with Ashish. We would play cards.
What's the full name?
Ashish Chowdhury.
Ashish Chowdhury, yeah.
And we'd go down to the market and get, chocolate or toast or ice cream.
Right.
It was great fun.
Right.
It was great fun. He'd play cricket in the alley with all of his friends, in the lane with his friends. And he'd invite me to come, but I don't know what I did. It was so funny. I would just come and it was so much fun. So we grew very close all the way through. Then he went to college, and he went to Madison, Wisconsin, UW Madison, and did his studies. He graduated college and then took a job at a consulting firm that I think it was a coincidence, but the consulting firm was in Denver, where I lived.
Right.
So then since then, we actually have been very, very close, and we live in the same city. We do the vast majority of our bicycle adventures and ski adventures were together.
Nice.
So much so that we decided, hey, let's do bicycle adventuring back in India. So then we started actually bringing our bicycles back to Pune when we would visit, and we would do rides in Pune, or we would do the Mumbai-Goa ride. And that finally, that's what came to the Tour of Nilgiris.
Right. So, how did you first hear about Tour of Nilgiris, and how did you kind of end up signing up in 2018, right?
He must have heard about it.
Mm.
So we did one trip where we took our bikes to Pune and we rode from Pune.
Mm.
And you know how in India it takes a long time to get out of town,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But we would do it because it's good rides. And so we went and we did the Lavasa hill climb. We did the Sivnagad hill climb.
Yeah, yeah.
Great hill climbs.
Yeah.
And we love hill climbing, being from Colorado.
Mm.
And so we did the Pune area. Then we went and did Mahabaleshwar
Mm.
and learned about some of the big ghats out there.
Right.
And then we were like, okay, let's do Mumbai, Goa, because that seems like a good idea.
Yeah.
And when we did those three, then we started thinking, well, what else do we do?
Right.
And I don't know how he heard. He just heard
Yeah.
about it somehow.
Yeah.
The Tour of Nilgiris, I now know, is renowned for being high adventure.
Yeah.
And not just high adventure, but really well organized, right?
Right.
So for us international types that are a little skittish in the Indian culture, it works really well. It's incredibly easy.
Yeah.
So he said, okay, let's do this. It'll be great. It'll be organized. We don't have to think about anything. We just take our bikes. Let's go do it. And so we just did it.
Yeah. Yeah. So let us talk about the experience of Tour of Nilgiris 2018. And, this is the first time doing something like this in India, organized tour and all that. With a bit of competition,
Yes.
a little bit of touring, a bit of, racing, all that. So how was the whole experience?
It was very eye-opening. It was thrilling. It was absolutely spectacular. You're being conservative when you say a little bit of competition. You'll remember that was Naveen and Nils, the Belgian pro, and KKR had just come off of his shiny new road championship. And then Shiven, who's up doing all these mountain bike championships. I mean, it was just... And then there was the Hong Kongese that showed up and the Danish that showed up, and everyone is fast. Everyone is fast. And it was a blast. It was just a blast because where I was in my mind in 2018, I was just below 40 years old. I was 36, 37 years old. And for the most part, I was peaking in my own performance of cycling. And so I was racing. I was racing a lot, and I loved racing. I love racing. So the combination of good roads and adventure with a competitive aspect was just too good to be true. And I love Indian food, right? So I love travel and Indian food. So the whole being able to, like the lunch stops with good food, and the hotels and all the organization where your baggage is just brought to you, it was incredible.
By the time you finish the ride, the baggage is in your room.
And so just the luxury of it was, I mean, it just can't even describe how cathartic it was for me then to have the luxury of tour organization with the exoticness of like Indian culture and food and scenery, with the performance and the thrill, the adventure of the group that was there. It was a defining life moment for me in 2018.
Nice. When defining life moment, you said, and that is the word that I use for my experience back in 2011 when I first did my when I did my first TFL.
Oh wow!
Right, it completely changed the way I looked at cycling. And, how much I learned from observing other people ride and race. So it was fantastic. So what took you 6 years to come back?
It's been a tough journey, right? So when I first came here in 2018, I was several years into running my own business. So I opened up a bike shop and a coffee shop, and I had a kid. And so my hands were full, to say the least, right? And life I was really throwing everything out for life. And so it took a lot of resources to come in 2018. So much so that it wasn't even considered to be a practical option to return for at least 6 years. Around in between then, since the first Tour of Nilgiris, I had 2 more children, and I closed the business and began a different career. So much life transition, so much life challenge, and yet it absolutely never left my mind. It never left my dreams, but it stayed in that lofty dream state for a long time. And it was only until really last year that I thought, I need to get back. I've got to get back there. I've got to get back. It's been tugging at me. You know, it would never let go. You can't forget the Tour of Nilgiris.
No, we'll before we come back to Tour of Nilgiris in this year, I want to talk a little bit about the bike shop experience and all that, right? So how did you get into, because you started working with the university and stuff like that after you graduated. How did the bike shop, starting a bike shop and cafe, get into it? How did you get into it, and how was the whole experience?
Well, pure naivete.
Because bike business is a tough business.
It's a tough business
all around the world.
The adage in the bike industry is you have to have $2 million to make $1 million. Right? I don't have $2 million. I have far from it. I had $500,000 when I started the thing, and but money aside, I was working as an administrator at the university. It's not a dream job. And I think a lot of people aspire to owning their own business. But I think if I were to be so bold, I would say that there's maybe some misplaced intentions there. I don't know what the underlying psychology is behind someone wanting to run their own business. But truly running your own business is a very different thing. And I think that there's a very specific skill set and personality type that successfully runs a business. I say that as a preface. When I opened the business, I loved bicycles, obviously. I loved coffee, and I loved the communal coffee culture. I love people chat. And we all know that in cycling, cyclists love coffee. And if they don't love coffee, they like tea. And if they don't like tea, they like something that they can congregate and chat about after they ride. You see? And so there's always a natural connection there, that cyclists and drinking something, sitting around and drinking something is a natural connection. So that was the inspiration for the business. Right? So it's fine. So I raised up some money. I start the business, no problem. And I run it for however many years I run it. That's when I start to learn the hard lessons of actually running a business. That, you have to hire and fire people, and you have to train people, and you have to do good quality work. You have to be a part of the community so that people know that you are a good business as opposed to a bad business. And in the end of the day, you have to make money, right? And so you have to invest in, okay, what do I want to sell? And what's selling? What are people going to buy? And that part I'm not so good at.
Right. Now, you closed that bike shop and got back to working in corporate, right? And now coming back to TFN, you showed up in TFN 2018 on your what is that, one by what is that, gravel bike?
It was basically my gravel bike. I call it my adventure bike because back then gravel bikes weren't a thing. That wasn't really a thing. It was adventure bikes. And so you didn't want to have a front derailleur because that's one more thing that could break. You didn't want to have hydraulic brakes because you might have to bleed them. So everything was cable. It was it was meant for durability. It was made of steel so that the airlines could chuck the bike, no problem. So it was designed for ruggedness, right?
Right. And I remember precisely because I knew that you would face difficulty going up Kalahatty.
Oh gosh.
Because back then we were still, allowed to ride up Kalahatty,
Yeah.
and you did that. And on that gearing, I could see that you were fast still, but you struggled.
Yeah.
So what was the experience of Kalahatty like? And do you compare Kalahatty with anything else that you have done?
Kalahatty is, as we all know, it's an enigmatic climb. It's famous. It needs to go in the register of good world climbs.
Right.
Okay, it needs to be on that list. When you watch these videos that the Euros do all the time of top 20 climbs, whatever. You've got the Alpe d'Huez and you've got all those European climbs. Fine. The Kalahatty has got to go in the list. It's got switchbacks. It's very steep. There's baboons everywhere, right? But the difference is that when you come to the top, you're not in a Swiss Alps. There's not snow. There's not mountain goats and quaint little cafes everywhere. But you open up into a agrarian Indian culture.
Yeah.
And you're still in a subtropical area.
Yeah.
And so it's lush, it's green, and it's still steep. It is unrelenting. In fact, the steepest part of Kalahatty is at the very end.
Yeah.
And it's not uncommon for the ox carts to be going faster than you are on your bicycle, right? And you're only at that point, you're only riding your bicycle out of a matter of pride, right? You got to keep your feet in the pedals. You can't walk. There's no walking, okay? But people are walking faster than you up the Kalahatty. I miss the Kalahatty. I'm grateful to this year the fact that we're still climbing to Uti.
Yeah.
It's still a magical place up here.
Yeah.
It's
still a massive climb.
Yes.
Just less steeper.
Exactly.
And longer. But
right.
Yeah. And coming to this year's TFN, how has it been so far, and how are you enjoying?
Well, in terms of segueing from talking about my adventure bike, right, the first time, I learned that the luxurious handling of the TFN, right, the roads are very high quality down here. I was like, oh, I don't need to bring my adventure bike. I can bring my really fancy road bike, and there's so many people here with really fancy bicycles. So I was like, okay, this is fine. If I need to bleed my brakes, I can bleed my brakes. If I need to charge my Di2, I can do that, no problem. And so for the most part, I'm very grateful. The roads, it's so much fun with a really good bicycle. And there's a few potholes you just have to learn to deal with. It's okay. It's part of the adventure.
Right.
But it's been just overwhelmingly enjoyable to revisit some of the roads, and also the new roads, the fresh routing that they do every year. They don't have to do that, but they do. They come up with new routes. It shows that the TFN planners really care about the integrity of TFN. My God, it's so good. To that end, I'm filled with just as much, if not more, awe this time as when I came in 2018 at just the majesty of the roads. They are reminiscent to me of all the roads that I watch and dream about when I watch the Belgian classics, or when I watch the Strada Bianca, when I watch these famous, iconic rides on television. And here I am riding through gorgeous and road quality that it's better than some of the stuff we have in the States.
Yeah. Amazing to hear, because this is your second time and you are talking about different routes and all. I'm riding for the 12th time. I haven't done some of the routes that in all these years. The Talakaveri was completely new for me, and the routes that we took yesterday were like completely new to me. I mean, I am blown away, in the last 12 years I've
Yeah.
been doing that. I am still able to do some amazing new
Yeah,
routes.
yeah,
And like you rightly said, the kind of work that these guys put in to find these new routes and give us this experience
Yes.
is amazing.
It's really amazing. It shows they care.
Yeah, definitely. So what are some of the memories that you take that come to mind when you think of TFN, be it from 2018 or now?
Probably the two defining memories that I dreamt of for 6 years, since the first time to this time, was those rolling hills through the tea plantations. I had never seen tea before, so I didn't understand how, for as far as you can see, beautiful, lush, green, and fully groomed hillsides. I mean, these are manicured hillsides, like you're in some kind of. It's so good, and the road quality is so good, and it's so rolly and flowy and swoop. You never have a road that you look down and you're like, oh man, it's gonna take a long time to get to the other side. No, because you can never see any road going that far. It's just winding and beautiful, beautiful. I still think about that. I think about it almost every day. It's so fun. And then the second is just the food. The lunch stops are so cool. Coming from a lot of events in the States, they'll have a table and they'll have bananas and then they'll have energy bars and then they'll have gels. That's it.
Yeah.
Right? And then they'll have water.
Right.
And here they're like, no, here's this, what is it, a bamboo plate. And here's some chapati and literally some dal or some chana.
Yeah.
And it's just so cool.
And 2-3 varieties of rice.
Yeah. And it's so good. So I remember those two things the most.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Amazing. So what is riding like for you nowadays, and with 3 kids and the work and all this? How do you manage?
I have a lot of luxury, a lot of privilege. What's the word that I'm looking for? I'm very blessed that I'm able to go and ride as much as I can. But the vast majority of my riding is done either pre-dawn, just pre-dawn. I ride before, I try to ride a lot before the kids get up, before I have to go to work. And so I squeeze that stuff in. In Colorado, it's very easy to go for a long ride, either mountain or road, without having to spend a lot of time in traffic. So that's a big privilege. And I understand that, especially when I come to places like this, I understand that it's difficult to get out of town. For me, I can get out of town pretty quick on a bike ride from home. So I do a lot of riding at 5 a.m. Even when it's snowing or cold outside, I'll put big gloves on and big hats and parkas and just go.
Yeah. Trainer is not a thing for you?
I personally don't like the trainer. But that's very much a personal thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if it has to do with just my own physiology that I get very, very sore when I ride the trainer. So it's very unrewarding. It's the opposite of unrewarding. It's frankly kind of punishing. It's awful.
It is. It is the same for everyone.
I hate it. So I would literally rather put on gloves, put on every piece of clothing I have, and go outside in the freezing cold and the dark.
Yeah.
Then ride on the trainer. I don't know. Maybe that'll change. Maybe I'll change some fit things and try to ride inside more.
Right. So you squeeze everything in before the kids wake up, and you have to get ready to work.
I'll try. Yeah, absolutely. So and my wife, to be honest, my wife does the vast majority of the work with the kids. She's home there now with the kids. But I'll try to go very early in the morning, and then she'll get the kids ready and get them up. And then, I might go to work. And then I try to do a bit of a trade so that she can have some time to relax and have time to herself. But obviously, if I didn't have her there, I wouldn't be doing any of this riding.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
right? So it's sort of a, yeah.
Right. So over the last 20, 24 years of riding
Yeah.
and all that, right? Or being a working athlete as such, what are some of the learnings that you have, that you take that you can share with fellow working athletes?
Boy, that's an interesting. Is there anything to learn? I mean, it's as a working athlete, you just have to squeeze it in. It's. I wish there was a lesson. I wish if there's a lesson, maybe I need to listen to more of the podcast. Is what I need to do. But man, it's so funny because you asked earlier. You said it earlier. I don't know what you said. Something about hours.
Mm-hmm.
You don't start counting the hours until you're a true working athlete, right? Because then you're like, well, okay, I gotta be at work by 8:30. So if I work backwards, I've got to go. If I want to ride for 90 minutes, then I need to leave this much time to change. And all of a sudden you're counting all the minutes and the hours just in order to get the precious 90-minute ride in.
Yeah.
You know, and as a working athlete, you just count your hours and you count your hours. I don't know. I don't have any sage wisdom. I'm just trying to stay fit and race and I love that sense of adventure. I love the exertion part of it. And so I'm still just going balls to the wall. I suppose if there was a lesson in there that I do need myself to learn is to relax, you know, and don't forget to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's so much mania around like trying to squeeze everything in and plan everything in and I personally have forgotten many times to enjoy the ride. Yeah. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And even if the ride itself isn't enjoyable, you might say to yourself, oh, this is a training ride, or I have to go do intervals, right? So of course it's not enjoyable, it's hard, right? And you're doing it because in theory, you're building towards something else.
Right.
But especially for working athletes, you don't know that the day will come for your big event and you're going to be sick, you know, or work will call you in or something. And life is just going to be like, JK, you're not going to do this event.
Right.
And so if you spent your whole summer or your whole year frantically preparing for something, and then it doesn't even happen, what are we doing?
Yeah.
So I think if there was a lesson that I personally need to learn is just don't forget that why are we doing this? Like, do have fun sometimes.
Yeah.
You know?
Enjoy the process.
At least enjoy the process, right? Even if you are counting the minutes of the process.
Nice. That is a great way to, great note to end on.
Oh, good.
Thank you for taking the time and sharing your experience.
Oh, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you.
That was my conversation with Peter. I hope you enjoyed that. If you are enjoying these podcasts and are finding them useful, please consider supporting the podcast by subscribing to it on YouTube as well as on your favorite podcasting app. It really helps. Thanks again for your continuous support. See you next week with another guest.